How you doing, guys? Today we're continuing some work on the senior steering wheel. We're getting right there, right where I want to be to start priming and primer filler and finishing up with the paint process so we can get this project done. As you can see, I got the little diamond piece or the little triangle piece, however you want to say it, glued into place. It's solidly mounted. It ain't going anywhere. And I wanted to just get the original wheel from my senior so we can take a look at a little bit of what will be the difference as well as something that needs to be done. The one thing that's going to be a difference, unfortunately, is there is going to be a little bit of a ledge right here. I'm going to try to shape it and smooth it to make it look natural, but because of the damage that was done to the center of the wheel, it was going to be impossible to get the diamond to actually fit flush with the center hub. But I'll clean that up and make that look as neat as I possibly can. But one thing I can do is if we take a look at this, we'll take a look at it from an angle. You can see how thin the diamond is. You can see how thick this diamond is. So I'm going to have to take the 80 grit sandpaper. I'm going to sand this down to a point where it is just about as thin as this. And then I'll talk about the final shaping that I'm going to do in order to make it blend in real nice and look almost original. All right, let me get to sanding. With a little bit of 80 grit sandpaper and a sanding block, I'm trying to see where the heck my sanding block is so I can show you. Oh, there it is, this longer sanding block. I was able to go ahead and thin this thing down real nice, and you can tell it's been thinned down pretty nice. I did put a little bit of spot putty along the edges just to fill it in, but I think when you look at that one, and then we look at this one, it's pretty close. I think it's close enough. Before I go ahead and roll the edges, because if we look here real quick, we can see that the points are sharp, but the edges are rolled over. So before I go ahead and roll these edges over in this area, here, here, and here, and also on the inside, I'm going to roll the edge over real nice so it just looks more original. I'm going to go ahead and blow out all these little voids in the epoxy. Make sure they're good and clean, and then I'm going to go ahead and put a little bit of spot putty all over this thing to fill those voids in. And then when I do the sanding with like 220 to make it all nice and smooth and blend all the edges, I'll roll this edge, the top one, and then the inside, and then it should be ready for primer. I'll also sand all these little spots of spot putty where there's just some scratches or gouges or something to that effect. But that is the plan. So let's go ahead and clean this up. I am going to take a little, one thing I will do, I'll mention, is I'm going to take some masking tape and masking tape this over so that way I don't get crap over this edge into this little area. So I have to go ahead and resand it. So I got the masking tape right over there. So I'll masking tape the edges off, coat this with the spot putty, let it cure, and then we'll go ahead and sand it flat and smooth, just to the point that it fills all the voids in, and we should be ready to prime it. With the spot putty in place, I'm just going to let it sit out here in the sun and cure. I did do a couple little touch-ups here and there, only because I found some voids, so I wanted to fill those in. But overall, it looks really good. It's ready for a 220 sanding, and then I'm going to go ahead and prime the center of it really well. That way, I'm sand this all down nice and smooth, do the whole 220 all in this area so it's nice and blended, and then I'm going to go ahead and prime it up real well, at least the center of the wheel. I'll deal with the outside later, but just to make sure I got that all really dialed in and nice. All right, let's get to sanding. Okay, with all of the spot putty sanded down, it feels real smooth. I rolled the edges over. I think it looks pretty darn good. I'm going to go ahead and tape this area off real quick, and I'm going to go ahead and spray it with some primer filler. I'm at that point now where I need to do that so I can see how this is going to look in general. So let me tape off the center here. Let's get it sprayed with some primer filler, and then we'll go from there. Well, hopefully it'll be 80%, 85% there. With the primer dried or cured, however you want to say it, I did start to sand the top of this diamond area or triangle area, and it's coming out real nice. I did do a couple little blow throughs, but because it's all plastic and epoxy, it doesn't matter. And this, I'm pretty much going to clean off the steel, so that way when I paint it black, it looks nice and smooth. But in general, looks real good. I do have to just sand, I just got to sand these areas down a little bit just to smooth them out. So I'm going to do this entire area, and then I'm going to put one good solid coat of primer over the entire wheel. And then from there, I'll do some wet sanding. Right now, I'm just dry sanding it with like 400 grit. Just to make sure that this is all smooth and it's all dialed in for the most part. And then all these other little spots, they all feel real good. So a good coat of primer and a good wet sand. And this thing should be ready for some black paint, but I do have some sanding to get through. With a solid coat of primer all over the entire wheel. I'm gonna let this dry and cure and get happy, and then I'll wet sand this with 400 grit. I am going to need to do a little bit of touch-up body work around the rim. There are a couple spots that I missed. There's a little spot right in here that I missed. But in general, that is where we are. Now, I did lose some definition of the edges on the pretense that I put on a lot of primer. So I'll dial in all those edges and the arcs and the curves when I wet sand it with the 400. So that won't be today. So let's get back to it tomorrow. With the first coat of primer on the entire wheel, it's starting to look real good. I mean, some fine tuning with some 400 grit wet around here should make that mint. I did start to sand this area of the wheel. There's like a little piece of metal sticking out right here, so I might have to do something with that. But in general, the primer laid real nice. So I'm just going to go ahead and continue wet sanding this thing down and try to get it done tonight if I could, meaning the wet sanding, and it should be ready for paint. With the primer sanded out with 400 grit wet, I'm pretty impressed with the way the wheel came out. Hopefully you can see this on the camera, but it actually looks real good. I mean, it's sanded out real nice. I'm sorry about jumping around here with the wheel, but I'm trying to do this with one hand. You know, in general, I think that looks pretty darn good. Let me pull away a little bit. I mean, the shape is right there. You know, there's a few little imperfections here and there, but overall, if we get real close to it, I think I might be able to show you. You know, that actually came out pretty good. Overall, the lines are real straight. The roundness is real smooth, I should say. You know, all of this looks real good. I mean, if you look down this, you know, it actually looks pretty darn straight. So I'm pretty happy with it. It will need a little spot putty in a few spots. There was a couple larger scratches or dings in the wheel that I thought I could fill in with primer, but they're just a little too deep. So I'm going to go ahead and touch them up with a little bit of spot putty. I'm going to wet sand that down. Not today. I'm going to have to let that cure. And then I'll put one more coat of primer on the wheel, sand that out, and then it'll be ready for paint. Now, the owner of the wheel wanted it painted semi-flat black. So I have a one-shot kind of deal on this. In other words, I got to make sure the base, which is all the primer and the wheel itself, is smooth, straight, and ready to go. And then I'm going to spray it with semi-flat black, and the way it comes out is the way it comes out. If it was gloss black and I had a couple imperfections or a couple, maybe a little bit of dust or something like that, I can always just wet sand that out and then buff it. Semi-flat black really can't do that. It's pretty much spray it, cross your fingers, and hope for the best. So let me go ahead and start filling in these last couple little dings that are a little bit too deep for the primer. I'll get it primed, and then we'll start, and then we'll look it over. With the second coat of primer on the wheel and sanded down, it actually looks pretty good. I'm real happy with the outcome. It seems to be real smooth. There are a little couple
bips here and there. I think there's only like 3, so it's not absolutely perfect. You will never see the little marks. I mean, they're minute, but in general, the wheel is ready for paint. I just got it out here in the sun to I had put wax and grease remover all over it, so I wanted to just let it, make sure it really flashes off real good and dries before I start to paint it. I got the table set up. One thing I am going to need to do is going to need to prop the steering wheel a little higher up off the table than when I was priming it, because I was a little thin on the primer on the backside, which doesn't really matter. But we're going to come over here to where my senior parts are, and this is actually the top portion of the steering shaft. The bottom portion is right here, the worm gear that goes in the steering box. So just to make life easy, I'm going to set this up in this position, put the wheel on there, and then paint it using the top half of the steering shaft as the prop rod. Okay, so let's get this thing set up and we'll squirt some paint. So 3 coats, 10 minutes apart, 2 light coats, and then a final coat that was a little heavier than the first 2 coats. Basically, I followed the directions, and with semi-flat black, you really have to follow the directions. Now, it looks a lot glossier than it should, and that's because I just finished the 3rd coat. I think it laid out really nice. I mean, I'm super happy with the way this came out. Everywhere looks real good. I mean, I'll give you kind of a side view here. You can just see that, you know, it laid down the center. Everything just kind of laid down real nice and real smooth. So super happy with the way this has come out. I'm going to let it sit and dry. And once it's all dry, which will probably be like tomorrow, we'll take a final look at this wheel. We'll call the project done, and we'll wrap it all up. And there it is. It's about 24 hours since I sprayed it. The paint laid down really nice. I didn't really see any material imperfections in the wheel. There are a couple areas that I probably could have done a little better, to be honest with you, but in general, the wheel came out real nice. The only thing that I would say is maybe a minor complaint is the sheen of the semi-flat black paint is a little bit glossier than I would have liked. I wish it was a little flatter, but in general, I think it came out real good. Let's take a look at that center section. And as you can see, with a little bit of filler, primer, some good old-fashioned sanding, that triangle piece on the top here looks like it was actually molded in. This particular side is in the shaded side, but in general, if you come over here to the light, I mean, I think that looks pretty good. The sides are all in real nice shape. Very happy with the way they came out. Take a look at those. There you go. And then when we look up from the top, it looks the part. So I'm real happy with the way this came out, and I think the owner is going to be real happy with the wheel also. All right, guys, thank you very much for watching. Thank you for all your nice comments on my prior videos. If you could please like, share, subscribe, add a comment, that would be helpful. And as of late, a couple people have asked me or told me that they weren't receiving the notifications of my videos being uploaded. So if you could, ring that bell again. And as always, have a nice day until the next video.